Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden has been meeting with the leaders from several Nordic countries in Finland's capital. Biden's visit follows this week's annual NATO summit in Lithuania. Finland joined the military alliance this year. Sweden is expected to do the same shortly. Our diplomatic editor, James Bayes, reports from Helsinki.
President Biden flew straight here to Helsinki from the NATO summit in Lithuania that the White House believes was a success. President Zelensky may have been unhappy he didn't receive a more exact timeline for his country's membership of the alliance, but he was praising US leadership. Many allies may privately feel disquiet about Biden's decision to send cluster munitions to Ukraine, but they didn't raise their objections publicly. And the biggest breakthrough appears to have been persuading Turkey's President Erdogan to drop his opposition to Sweden's NATO membership. And that's why this second summit in Helsinki with the 5 Nordic nations is important. The security situation in this region has been transformed. It's not just Sweden. Finland became NATO's 31st member 3 months ago. It's a country with a 1,300-kilometre border with Russia and with a large and capable military with expertise in winter warfare.
We just finished a historic NATO summit. I think it was historic, where we welcomed Finland's accession to NATO and reached an agreement to move forward on Sweden's membership in NATO. And it was a reminder that the nations around the table not only share common history, but we share common challenges. And I would add, presumptuously, common values.
This summit's not just about Ukraine. All of these are Arctic nations, and NATO is worried about Russia and, to an extent, about China. Because of climate change, areas that in the past were inaccessible both on land and sea could become part of a future battlefield. This summit will have been keenly watched in Moscow. It was held in the presidential palace that was once Russia's seat of power when it ruled Finland until the 1917 revolution. It's the same building where President Putin met President Trump 5 years ago. But now, in this part of the world, Russia finds itself very much on the outside looking in. James Bayes, Al Jazeera, Helsinki.
Well, let's bring in Janne Talas. He's the CEO of the Finnish Martti Ahtisaari Peace Foundation and also a former Finnish diplomat. Usually in Helsinki. Today, Janne joins us from Rome. Janne, I imagine there's some relief in Helsinki about joining NATO, especially given Finland's own history with Russia?
Yes, I think this was a long overdue decision, and that was the feeling in Helsinki.
During the NATO summit, though, Janne, every Russian analyst that I spoke to, many of whom were directly or indirectly connected to the government, said that Moscow's nuclear capabilities will now be deployed to ensure that they cover Finnish and Swedish territory. How real do Finns there feel the threat is of escalation?
You mean a nuclear escalation? I think there is always a possibility, but I think the likelihood of nuclear escalation is very, very low.
In terms, though, of the relationship with Russia, I mean, you're a former diplomat yourself. Finnish diplomats, I believe, are already being expelled from Russia. I also understand there are worries that Moscow might start sending more migrants over the border. Finland used to have good economic ties, right, with Russia. Where's that relationship now when it comes to diplomacy?
We are neighbors, so we have had a long and very complex history with Russia, with the periods of times of cultural and economic interdependence, and then very bloody wars, like 70 years ago, Winter War. Right now, the situation is like in neighbors. We have, as we heard from the report, a very long border with Russia. So there is a lot of activity always over such a long border. But at the same time, there is much less activity and connections over that border now after the Russian attack to Ukraine.
Well, speaking of that very long border, I've been curious about what NATO's plans might be for Finland and Sweden. We're talking about a huge amount of strategic territory here being added to the alliance. Now, I'm wondering, will we see a proliferation perhaps of new NATO bases?
You are asking a CEO of a peace organization. I'm not privy of NATO's plans, but I think there will be kind of integrated planning that we will see some new structures emerging in European military planning. That's for sure. But it is quite early, and for me, it is very difficult to say what they will be, but there will be new structures. I'm quite sure of that.
Sure. Well, let me ask the question this way then. Russia has made it clear that they think they're currently at war with NATO. Finland's just joined NATO. Do you think expansion, NATO expansion, makes your region safer, more peaceful?
Russia has said that they are at war at NATO, but they are not at war with NATO. They are at war with Ukraine. That is very clear. It's a rhetorical level. That's a different. It's a different situation than in a real war situation. I think the enlargement of NATO creates more stability and clarity in the region, and I think in those terms it is very clear. The Finnish decision, or the decision in Finland to join the NATO, was very clearly motivated by sudden change in the Russian policy as they attacked Ukraine. I think there was a very strong fear in Finland and in Sweden what would be the tenets of the Russian foreign policy. Finns and Swedes had thought for decades that they can deal with Russia and they can negotiate and they can have a diplomacy and diplomatic relations. Now it seems to be quite difficult to do it when the country is at war with another neighbor.
Sure. Well, given that, how significant then is US President Joe Biden's presence today in Helsinki?
I think it is significant. It is partly a victory lap for President Biden because he actually has steered the NATO through very difficult times, and also the Finnish and Swedish accession, continued support to Ukraine. At the same time, it's acknowledgement of Finnish diplomacy and skillful diplomacy, and also the outgoing President Niinistö. And thirdly, I think what is very important, and that's not been mentioned, it was an opportunity for the Nordic countries to make a common front on values and climate change and also tech issues. And I think it was very telling that President Niinistö talked about the Nordic family in the just when he had the press discussions a few minutes ago.
Jani Talas, the CEO of the Finnish Matti Ahtisaari Peace Foundation and a former Finnish diplomat. Thank you for joining us here on Al Jazeera, sir, and for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.